Hi there, I'm Ben Pearson. Welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. Every episode we talk through how to thrive in the tech world, not just survive. Now, if you want me to work with your team, just give me a shout. I love to help teams be more influential, memorable and successful with their stakeholders. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to book a chat. Hey everybody, and welcome to the Tech World Human Skills Podcast. It is brilliant to have you with us today, and we're in the live studio. So rather than being remote, I'm here with our guest today in the actual real studio. So if you want to watch along with the video, you can. Well, what are we talking about today? Well, today we're talking about how you influence people, how you persuade people, how you drive action with people. And we're going to think about that in the context of the rationale and logic is really powerful, really useful, but it's not the only thing. And it's great to also think about how you emotionally connect to people and energize them and help them to remember you. And a way of doing that is through what we sometimes call storytelling. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today. And we've got a brilliant guest to have this conversation with us. So our guest today is, shall we say, a bit of a veteran in the pre-sales world. He's worked at loads of places and got some amazing experience. So please, could you welcome to the show, Chinchen?
Hey, thanks for having us, Ben.
It is wonderful to have you back on the
Veteran
podcast.
pre-sales leader. I like that. Yeah, I think as we discussed, 15 years of being a nerd and a developer buried in code and an architect, and then 15 years of pre-sales leadership as well. So yeah, we've had to hone some of these skills.
We've had to hone some of these skills.
Yeah, it's been good fun.
So for people that haven't either seen you on the podcast before, because we had you on an episode a good while ago now, or don't know about you, do you just want to expound on your background a little bit?
So yeah, I suppose last 15 years have been pre-sales. So worked at a company called AppDynamics, which was eventually, after 5 years of being there, we got acquired by Cisco for 3.7 billion and change. So not too bad on that front. I ran the Northern European sales engineering team and then joined PagerDuty 8 years ago and gone from running EMEA pre-sales to running the global pre-sales team over there. So taking on that global role, and I will get into some of this as we go through, been very insightful when it comes to how do you motivate different parts of the world and cultures when you're a Brit to doing certain things as well. So looking forward to getting into some of that, Ben. Yeah.
Well, I think it's fair to say you've had a foot in the technical world and a foot in the how do we get people to buy our product, so a foot in the business world for a long time now. So lots of experience in this idea of there is a time and a place for a great rationale, a great bit of logic, and there's a time and a place for making, for telling something that people remember and that they engage with and they find interesting or shocking or it creates some kind of emotional response from people.
Yeah, and actually I think in some respects, I kind of even said you have the tech world and the business world. I feel like the lines are blurring an awful lot now these days. As I say, some techies are having to become less techies, you'll vibe code and use AI and all that sort of stuff. And and you're getting non-techies now becoming techies as well. So I think we've got to start skilling ourselves for what's to come.
Yeah. And so what I'd love to do today is to think about, this idea of maybe storytelling, but what I'm sort of thinking, I'm thinking a good way that we could run this episode together is, what do we mean by storytelling? Because I think some people just get put off by that phrase. So let's talk about what we mean by it and what we don't mean. Let's talk about why we think that's important, and there's some science behind this as well. So we'll have a little think about that. Then I think we'll have a look at how you do it. So maybe some top tips on how you actually do it. And then this is going to be an important bit, when you don't do it, because there's definitely times when you don't want to do it. So does that sound good? We'll go through.
Sounds perfect.
Right.
Let's do that.
Let's start then with what we mean by storytelling. So when you hear the word storytelling in this context, what does that mean to you?
it can end up meaning a plethora of different things as well. In some people's minds, it could be, oh no, it's going to be someone that's going to go on for hours and hours and bleat on to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Even actually tell a little story of my last team that I worked with, and he won't mind me calling him out, but a gentleman called Heath in a particular team actually works in North America. He was a consummate storyteller.
Okay.
And sometimes it was even the scenario that the team would say, oh yeah, I'm going into a meeting, I'm too techie for this. I need to bring the storyteller along. So they would actually then drag Heath into conversations. But one of his big roles in life was he wanted to teach others how to tell stories. And he was very good, and it is still very good, of course, at kind of really coming up with short, meaningful, relevant stories with a punchline, sometimes with metrics and decent outcomes, and they always had a nice structure to them. So some really niche skills that actually aren't too hard to pick up and understand.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think if you think about, I often say to people, be more Bambi. Now, and be more Bambi, right? And this is what I mean when I say be more Bambi, because if you were to take two sides, so two pieces of work, of writing, on different ends of the emotional scale, right? One end, I'm going to put the dictionary. Alphabetical list of words doesn't really engage people, right? If you were to just read the dictionary, I'm sure you wouldn't remember much of it. It's not got the most sense. It's just an unemotional list of words, right? And then at the other end, you've got Bambi. Now, spoiler alert, Bambi's mum dies. It's famous for making people cry. And
unless you're Phoebe from Friends and haven't seen the end, as we may recall, which is another little overlaid story on a story. Sorry, mate.
And so we people often spend too much time in tech closer to dictionary, and they need to step a little bit closer to being a bit more Bambi. That's not meaning to say that every business meeting we want everybody group hugging and crying, but we can move that way a little bit more. And I think we'll dig into a little bit that there's some real benefits of doing that. But I think the important thing is what we're not saying is you get into a business meeting, an important business meeting or an important technical meeting, and you start, once upon a time, there was a snake and an apple, or.
Yeah, I think there's a huge misconception, isn't there, about what storytelling is. And I think even the word story is probably misused because, people associate it with a 300-page novel. It's going to take a while to get through.
So to me, let's see if you agree with this. To me, we're talking about little examples of customers that have been in a similar situation to you, little anecdotes of disasters that have gone wrong, or little anecdotes of triumphs, or maybe case studies or examples. That's what I'm sort of thinking of as a story. Is that are you along the same sort of lines?
It is. I think people have a tendency actually as well to put it very businessy when it comes to storytelling. I'll quite often resort to, well, what do you speak to your mates down the pub about? Again, very British on that front for those that are not British. But down the pub, like you've got 5 individuals round a table, as it were. And who's kind of controlling the conversation? Who do people lean in and listen to? Who's injecting elements of, I quite often like humour being injected into a story because it makes things memorable as well. So who in that conversation is holding people? And then who, well, dare I say it, maybe even who's the one that everyone just groans when they start to talk because they're going to hit either a monologue or something that doesn't really go anywhere, or something that doesn't have a point. Or it could be an individual that just sits there silently soaking it in as they go through. So,
but the point being, if you need to be able to influence people, whether that might be that you're in a pre-sales role, whether that might be you're in a technical role and you need to influence your boss or somebody that runs another department, if they groan whenever you come towards them, that's never, you don't want to be the groaner.
Well, imagine as a boss, you're about to join you say you've got your half-hour one-to-one with a particular report and you are that report. And again, you go back to it. Do you want your boss looking forward to doing that one-to-one, or do they just dread doing it? Because come pay review times and things like that, you're going to want to be able to articulate what you can do and how well you do it.
So what we've got is what it is. It's the ability to engage people and to tell little anecdotes and engage people and make things a little bit more interesting, hopefully so that they drive an outcome. So that's what we're thinking sort of stories are. Let's think about why that's important. Maybe I could share something with you, Tim. So there's a lot of neuroscience about what happens when people are listening and what happens when people tell stories, that kind of stuff. Now I've put myself on the spot now because I can't remember the exact paper, so I'm going to pop it. I'm going to pop it in the show notes so you can have a look at. I'm not making this up, but the point is that you've got different parts of the brain. Now round the front here, sadly, this big bold part for me, you've got where all your rational thought and your logic and all your high level thinking happens round here. Right round the other side of the brain, just above the spinal cord, you've got your amygdala, and you've got where all the emotion stuff happens, things that create that like fight or flight type response from you, and that's over there. Now, what studies have shown is that if you can get all of the brain to light up at once, so not just part of it, so not just the rational part, but also the emotional part, a few things happen. First thing is your problem-solving capability gets better. So your cognitive processing, things like recall get better. So, for example, if you take those two things and I'm now talking to somebody I need to influence and I manage to light up all of their brain by having a great rational and logical argument, supplemented with an amazing emotional connection as well, they are thinking better and they will remember the things that I've said better. Isn't that a brilliant state to have your listener in?
That's great. Oh, to be honest, on these days, on back-to-back Zoom calls and virtual everything else, where all your 10 meetings that day just feel the same, you want to be that one that stands out.
Yeah.
What was the one that got that all flowing and back to that neuroscience theory?
Because and we were talking just before we got on here about sometimes you think some technical people might go, it's a bit of performative. So storytelling is just the person that waves their arms around.
No, not at all. I mean, techies, we have to do everything. As I say, I work very much alongside coders. When they're putting together things, you have these show and tell sessions where you need to show what you've developed, why you've developed it, how you went about developing it, some of the problems and obstacles you've had to overcome. So yeah, low-level techies, as it were, they have to be able to articulate this to an audience.
Yeah. And I think also, we were also talking about AI just before whilst we were drinking a cup of tea in the warm up to this, and more of that deep technical heavy lifting is being outsourced to AI, and so therefore if you're offloading all of that, the important part comes to be able to orchestrate that and then influence your leaders, decision makers on how your ideas and solutions are really useful.
Yeah. In fact, these days, as I say, it's ideas and solutions. That's the thing that's holding most people back on their AI journey. Isn't the tech or the code now? It's how do I come up with something that I'm going to play about with?
Yeah.
And kind of articulate that to a vibing agent or an autonomous coding agent. And
so it's actually that communication to an agent now is going to be in free text, actually, isn't it? It's not deeply logical, even writing the specifications. It's a lot more free text. Yeah. So that communication ability. So, have you got any examples where I know you talked about Heath earlier, but have you got any examples where you've seen storytelling really light up, or people have done it really well and they've therefore driven some impact that they wouldn't have if they'd have just gone about it in a really purely dictionary-like way?
So, as I say, so many times it can work really well, and also cover the not so well later on as well. Definitely, as I say, I come from a background of doing software demonstrations as well. So when you're embarking upon you've got a 40-minute slot to take a client through a journey, you then need to think about, well, how am I going to construct this story that I'm going to tell to them and show? So I always look for, when I'm doing software demonstrations, we worked in incident response software, and when I first joined the company, there was a lot of bland kind of, this is what this button does, this is what that button does. And one of my
death by feature kind of thing.
Death by feature. My first thing was, I'm going to tell a story of breaking something. so all of my demos for the first few years when I was in PagerDuty, we broke the client's website. So we took it down. Obviously, we didn't do it in reality. It was all simulated and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So we told the story typically to executives about how the individuals that work under them, what they do on a day-to-day basis when things go wrong, when things break, and then surface that to the fore. And of course, you're trying to cross the chasm from this is where you are today when things break, and this is where you could be in the future when things break, because things will always break, even in the world of AI. Yeah. Like we're already talking about, well, AI agents will fix things when they break. So we're always trying to cross that chasm. So yeah, I would use that 40 minutes would be my platform to tell that story. And we talked a little bit now about create catastrophe, and then kind of bring it back through. I will say as well, and we'll go into some of this a bit later on, I create catastrophe and fix it very quickly, and then go back through to explain. So we do a 3 minutes, so we won't leave any ambiguity that things are broken for much longer than they really are. But again, that negative element to start with, to kind of get someone to lean in. And again, I've always found when I present or tell a story, you need someone to just lean forward in their chair. Just that little movement makes a real difference. And you can even tell virtually if someone's leaning in to see what you're doing.
And if you compare that to the approach that would be, right, this is the tick box that you check if you've got more than 3,000 transactions per second. This is the one, the death by feature, the feature walkthrough.
That's a 2-day training course, isn't it? Yeah. Which even training courses, you have to pepper with stories to keep people engaged for 2 days.
Well, exactly. But, whereas what you're talking about is you're talking about the outcomes here, which is important. It's a really relevant story, that example that you're talking about. And it brings alive, and there's substance behind it, because then you demo it and you show, so this is how we'd set it up so that you never experience this in your... But it's a lovely way to do a story, isn't it?
It's great. And actually, I'll even say in the pre-sales world as well, with that, always having that call to action, that thinking about, well, what are you trying to achieve and what story are you trying to communicate across? So I've always thought, and again, in my world, it's always about 3 things. How do you help the clients that you're working with make money, save money, and not get their backside sued effectively? So revenue, cost, and risk. So it's always thinking about how do you tie your stories into those 3 elements as well and make a point about them.
Which drives business outcomes.
Business, it's all down to business. Yeah. And always ends up on those 3, bizarrely. I'd love someone to tell me a 4th, but I've only ever seen the 3.
Right. So we've thought about what it is. It's about bringing topics to life, anecdotes to life, that kind of stuff. We thought about why it's important. It makes people think well. It makes people connect. It makes them lean forward, that you were talking about. So have we got any practical tips? If I come to you, and then I've got some as well, what practical tips have you got on if somebody's not a natural storyteller, they're not that person down the pub, that they're perhaps maybe naturally a bit more silent, they're perhaps more the listener, but now, in a professional context, they do need to represent themselves, or they do need to talk to the customer effectively. How can they get better at doing it?
There's a few tips you can do. Let me think about. I'll try and do 2. I'll start with one example. Was there's a great book. I'm the same thing as you now. I can't quite remember what the name of the book was, but I remember reading it. And the gentleman there suggested capturing something every single day that was different from the norm, and putting it in a spreadsheet. Okay. And then maybe 2 weeks later or 3 weeks later, trying to look back and see if you can construct stories around those. Because sometimes it's the little things that you don't notice that can make for a great story.
So what you're saying is, so for people that are sat there with a blank page going, I haven't got any stories, if you just write down something interesting that happened every day and then reflect on it, something might pop out.
And the classic one, I suppose, that's one, and that was very academic. But let's look at number 2. So I like to try where we can, and we've had a few chuckles so far. So I go back to the humor element. Yeah. When you look at comedians and stand-up comedians keep people enthralled for ages, and some of them And again, you've got comedians that will do the very short kind of 30-second quip, or you'll have I actually, when I grew up in Chiswick 25 years ago, an onstage comedian at the local pub, absolutely brilliant, and turned out to be a gent called Michael McIntyre.
Right,
He's very good. So get to the point quickly. But he, again, it was some really good, compelling stories.
Yeah.
And I go back to that stupid thing observations. Yesterday, AWS London, I got there, and what did they have? They had those annoying, horrible zigzag things. The queues, right, to go and pick up your ticket. And I remember there was a McIntyre sketch about how us Brits like to get in those queues. We'll walk up and walk back and walk up and walk back. And again, the key thing about this sort of stuff is noticing these funny little things and patterns that stand out.
Yeah.
That you can either tell a humorous anecdote about or do anything around that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Pick on those little things. So
little things.
Pick them up, think about it, and then how can you articulate? And think about how comedians work as well. That's probably a good way.
I love comedians. Yeah, I go and see them often. I often see them live, and I love them. In fact, I got tickets to go and see Sam Campbell for Christmas. Nice. So that's coming up for me. I think a couple of things from me. First thing is make sure it's relevant. So that's the important thing. So sometimes people can be, there's a story they like, so they're going to tell that story regardless of the situation that they're in.
They've practiced it. It's their go-to story.
It's their go-to story. Yep. But it's irrelevant to the thing that they're talking about. And then that can start to put people's backs up because it's not engaging now. It's time wasting. We're almost drifting into the what not to do. But so make sure, I think, that the story is relevant. And so I like you, right, that spreadsheet, I think having a spreadsheet, or it doesn't have to be a spreadsheet. It's
very technical, isn't it? We go back to the question was, how does a techie do that? So I immediately went, spreadsheet.
But listing all the disasters, right? And over a 30-year career, there's a lot of disasters. What about the things that went really well? What have you heard from your mates? Just writing down just a list of all of those, because quite often things come down to, like you said, those big three of what was it? Making money, saving money, risk.
Not getting sued.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And probably most stories, you could talk about making money, losing money, or risk, particularly with disasters, losing money and risk, high risk, all of that kind of stuff. There's loads of ways that you could segue into use those stories to segue into other technical pieces. So I think get a list of them that then you can then start to think about how you might prep them a little bit, so you're not having to construct on the fly all the time, but you got these in the bank. The other thing I'd say is keep them short, right? Because we're setting this in the context of a business conversation or a technical conversation, not a 3.5 hour cinema trip to go and see Lord of the Rings.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
So keep it short.
Yep. There's a temptation to do that as well, and I'm guilty more than many people, I think. We talked about earlier on about talking to CROs and talking to pre-sales leaders as well.
Yeah.
I have lots of conversations with both very different audiences.
Yeah.
CROs want you to get to the point. So back to you got to make a story. It's got to be incredibly short. You may not even get a chance to finish the story if you go on a bit and waffle a little bit.
Yeah.
Pre-sales leaders, probably some of them a little bit of a different kettle of fish. And I think I used the quote earlier, more tangents than a trigonometry conference. So make sure you don't go off on a tangent and waffle into something else as well. It's definitely something I've still trying to learn to do. That's
it for everybody. I think everybody's on a bit of a journey, aren't they, at getting better at this sort of stuff. So sort of keep it relevant, keep it short. Let me give another one before we move on. A little bit of a structure. So this is sort of my top tip. And when I say this is all I'm doing is doing what Shakespeare did or what they do in all the Marvel movies. But basically, you take your anecdote and you put it in a 3-act structure. So the beginning, the middle, and the end. Well, that sounds a bit useless. What do I mean by that? Well, the beginning is like the setup. You set the scene. So where were you? Who was there? How can you make these people a bit more relevant or a bit more people connect with them a little bit? So you sort of set the scene. This is where I was. This is who I was with, or wherever it's set. Then you get to the middle. Here's the action, the outage, the disaster. These things happened. We were working all night to try and fix it, that kind of thing. And then you get to the resolution. Did it work out and it was a triumph? Yay. Or did it not and it was a disaster? Boo. So, and then you can maybe use a triumph if you were trying to talk about how your solution could be a great way, or you can use a tragedy of this is life before your solution sort of thing.
Absolutely.
And I think if you've just got that framework running through your brain, I'm just going to set the scene, I'm going to tell you what happened, and this was the resolution. I'm going to keep it short, 1 minute, 2 minutes. I'm going to keep it relevant. Those are great sort of 3 points to help keep people on point and practically do it.
I like the idea. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, I'd be in a 40 minutes demonstration as well. I think you can go to the scenario where you have too many of those 2-minute stories. So you've got to be very careful to use them when they're relevant.
Yeah.
And not go, oh, the goodness me, not another story.
Not another story. Well, let's get to that. Because that's a brilliant segue. Let's get into that and double click on that. When do you not use stories?
It's always a beautiful question, isn't it? Genuinely, when you need to get to the point.
Okay.
When you need to make some very quick 1, 2, 3 style statements of outcomes and things we need to achieve.
Yeah.
Not go off on a tangent, because you just need to, I think the phrase is get down to brass tacks.
Yeah.
So definitely a time to just leave them to one side.
Yeah.
I think there's the when do you not use them. So definitely in those scenarios. And the second scenario is sometimes just use 1 or 2.
Okay.
If you're engaging with someone for half an hour, you maybe want to use, as I say, 1, 2, maybe 3, but not more than that, because it's too much for someone to digest and take away.
Yeah.
And in fact, in some of the conversations, I can be very transparent. I'm personally probably guilty of having too many stories.
Yeah.
And then at the end, I'll do 2 things really. I'll try lots of stories to see which one lands.
Yeah, right, throw mud at the wall.
Yeah. It literally is the mud at the wall syndrome. And then the other one is just by using too many, it's just overwhelming by individuals, and they won't take away a takeaway literally from those sorts of things. So it's
there's a great the metaphor I really like for this, which I think applies, and it's just exactly what you're saying. Too much mustard. Like if I think I like a ham sandwich, right? Put a little bit of mustard on. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's elevated it up. That's a lot better. But if you put like an inch thick piece of mustard on the top, your head explodes, your nose explodes. It's a terrible experience. And for me, that's what I think about storytelling. You whack it in at the right place at the right time. It injects energy. It helps people lean forward. Brilliant. But if you do too much, overwhelms people, like you were saying, it's like knocking their block off. So use it sparingly and effectively. Would you agree with that then?
Totally and utterly. And actually, again, transparently, I'll share. We opened up our conversation and I jumped into, I've had 30 years of experience. And actually, that's one of the biggest challenges for a lot of individuals is as we gain more experience, we gain more stories, where sometimes there's a temptation sometimes to try and share everything that you've gained in a 30-year experience. You've got to then try and think, what do I just leave at home? And what do I make relevant to this conversation? And then when someone asks me about something, then it gives me the opening or the permission to jump into a story. But unless I'm asked, don't force too many onto someone.
And I think also it depends on the type of person, doesn't it? So different people have different tolerance for stories. Some people love a great verbose story. Some people hate a verbose story. So the other thing is maybe trying to think about, right, well, who am I talking to? Certain personality types. I'm thinking insights, discovery insights, or Myers-Briggs. Certain personality types might prefer more of an emotional connection. Some might people be more logically inclined, but that doesn't mean exclusively logically inclined. They still like a little bit, but not loads. Maybe different countries like
countries and culture have a very big impact, I've noticed, on storytelling. Yes.
Right. What do you mean by that?
I would say, if you look at, I'd pick on the folks in the US. It's the home of Hollywood. Love a good story and definitely can get into it. In fact, I had an individual that worked out in the US, worked over in California. It was a company we just acquired. They were the technical guru of that particular product, but very used to working in California and West Coast America. So it was to that individual, can you come over to Europe for 4 weeks? I haven't got any staff that are aware of the product. I want you to work and sell here to a European audience. And after those few weeks, I can call him out, Craig, if he does listen to this. And Craig was like, I can't get over this. Like, so what's up, Craig? In where I'm from, you ask someone about their pain and they'll tell you everything. And we're talking not just business, we're talking about mortgage and the kids' school and other challenges they've got through life and everything else. And then they might tell you about, 20 minutes in the 40 minutes of business-related pain. He says, over here in Europe, I ask someone their pain, and I think the answer I get is, why do you want to know? Okay, we're trying to talk business here. So what doesn't work? Everything works fine. Why are you asking these questions?
Yeah.
Well, because I'm in a sales role. And so very different culture. So you need to understand that cultural gap when stories do and don't work and when you need to get to the point.
Yeah.
As well as, and as I say, I'm going through some scenarios at the moment where I'm finding if you're having an executive conversation, back channel first. Do they like stories? Do I need to get to the point so that when I meet that individual, am I meeting them on the level that they want to communicate at as well?
Yeah. Brilliant. Let me just look at my notes. Was there anything else that we wanted to talk about? So we've talked about what we mean by storytelling. We've talked about why that's important. We've talked about some tips on how you do it. Yeah. We've talked about when you don't want to do it. Maybe one final bit that we were going to talk about was the tangents of the tangents of the tangents and how actually you reduce clarity by telling half a story, then digressing off of half of that story, and then and you just really muddy the waters.
Yeah, I'm very guilty of doing this as well. Right. And for a podcast, this is the sort of scenario where you have a stage, and we can talk about things probably longer, potentially in some areas than you would do otherwise. I've been looking at changing roles recently as well, so that's well known. So I have been doing some interviews with various individuals, and again, you can be very guilty of having so many stories that you end up thinking, you get halfway through one and then you think of another thing comes into your head and you end up going on a tangent on that and another tangent on another tangent. I've had scenarios where, with permission of people I'm speaking to, I'll use an AI note taker.
Okay.
And then afterwards, I'll ask, how did that interview go? And it will quite often be used a lot of stories.
Yeah.
Interview, not a podcast.
Okay.
Podcast would have been great. Interview, not so great. So yeah, as I say, learn to rein some of these things in as well. Yeah. Definitely helps.
So, and it's going back to that too much mustard. It's going back to they're there to energize, they're there to amplify, they're there to engage. They're not there to distract, bore, frustrate, all those sort of more negative words with people that perhaps go, use too many stories or too long a stories.
And the bit I like that we discussed earlier as well was about the if you've got an exec in the room and you're going to do, maybe go back to the scenarios of doing a demonstration, 40-minute demonstration, don't assume they're going to be in the room for the full 40 minutes. So you mentioned this earlier as well.
Yes. Yeah.
If you're doing some sort of disaster thing, we broke your website and the exec gets a call and has to leave the room. The only thing they remember of you is all the stuff that was going wrong. Yeah. And you never got a chance to get around to the moment, the everything being solved sort of moment.
So they leave with that negative image as opposed to the positive.
Never a good thing.
Do you know what? You're so right. And I know that there are some techniques that people use out there where they will try and take like a story narrative, like the hero's journey is one they quite often use, and try and say, right, if you've got a 40-minute session, right, this is the arc that you're going to go through, where you're going to start off with there's a likable hero and he goes through conflict, meets a mentor, the night of the dark soul, this sort of story framework, and you set everything to it. And I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of that. It works well in Star Wars or The Matrix.
When you got 3 hours to sit in a dark room.
3 hours. But to your point is, in today's society, when we're having business meetings that may well be online, people get called out, they get distracted, they got Teams messages going off. Slack's, dinging in the background. And so nobody can give you that level of attention that you can't guarantee that people will give you that level of attention. So if you're going for a punchline approach where the big reveal, but they've all been called out of the meeting after 5 minutes. So the way I like to think about storytelling is how are we going to use it like mustard? How are we going to inject it at various points throughout? But actually, in my opening, I'm going to give you the key message, why it's important to you in the first 2 minutes, because then I might lose control of the narrative. But at the first 2 minutes, I might just survive the first 2 minutes. So I'm going to try and get everything out in that sort of first 2 minutes.
Which could be even a nice little headline about, I'm going to show you how 15,000 customers save money using our solution, or how 15,000 customers drive revenue. So at least you know the point that someone's going to get to.
Yeah.
I think Peter A. Cohen does a great element on showing the last thing first.
Right.
So this was years ago, 25 years ago, I was told about rather than, if you're going to show someone how to print a document, just hand them the printed document and say, I'm going to show you how I got this, rather than fire up Microsoft Word, type some stuff in, do something else, go file, print, and then wait a few minutes. And then if you go through all that stuff, you would have lost their attention. So start last thing first.
Yeah.
TLDR, isn't it?
TLDR, too long didn't read. Yeah, perfect. Well, Tim, I think we've run out of time. So let's just reflect on the episode a little bit. What would be your key takeaways, do you think, from what we've talked about?
I think I'm going to focus on 2. Come up with a library of stories, things through your experience. You might be 5 years into your journey or 30 years into your journey. What are the interesting stories that you feel are relevant to yourself that you can use to relay a point to others? So have that bank anyway and get ready to use it. And then the second one is know when to use them. So think appropriate and start practicing bringing out those stories as well. I think will really help.
Yeah. And I think from my perspective, it's that making an emotional connection. So this storytelling isn't just for extrovert people on a big stage at a big event waving their arms around. It's about how people communicate really effectively. And actually, if you can get that bit of the brain that lit up, all of the brain lit up, you're going to be more persuasive. You're going to be more influential. You're going to be able to drive more action. And that's what we need to do, So taking ownership of your own career, that is a good skill to be able to influence, persuade, and drive action, whatever role you're in. And so these little anecdotes, I think, so that's a really good bit, I think, for me. That anyone can do. I mean, that's like a skill set. That's not you're born with. That's with I listed a load of stories in a spreadsheet. I thought about how I gave them a little bit of structure. I thought what they were relevant for, and I tried using them in some meetings, and then course corrected when they went well. Didn't go well.
Be rest assured, some can fall very flat on their faces, and sometimes actually halfway through, this ain't landing. I need to figure out, do I finish this off or do I just bail and give on up as well? So again, I said I'm 30 years and I'm still practicing. I tell some absolute humdingers sometimes. I think, I need to get out of this quickly or maybe wrap and get to the point.
Now, if people have loved what you've been talking about, how can people connect with you?
Good stuff. Best bet, LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/my/Tim Chinchen. I'm quite easy to find generally on LinkedIn as well. So feel free to link in.
Connect with you there. And from my perspective, what I will say is, I spend all day, every day, working with people in tech on how they do exactly this. So if this is something that you're interested in, give me a shout, because there's a chance that I might be able to help you with some really cool stuff, or help your team if you're looking to make your team a bit better. So give me a shout. So I would say the final thing, Tim, thank you so much for coming along. It's always a pleasure to speak to you. Ben. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
Don't go yet. Remember to subscribe to the podcast and rate the show. It really helps us grow and book new great guests. And remember, if the podcast isn't enough for you and you want weekly microlearning delivered straight to your inbox, sign up to the Tech World Human Skills Weekly. Head over to www.techworldhumanskills.com to sign up.